Hey, it's Sid with Table Talk with Sid features. We are back. Dawni Angel, the practical mystic, Reverend Jody, and we are ready to rock and roll this morning. We're going to talk about negotiating. So that is a skill that I actually thrive on. I love negotiating. It is something my dad taught me when I was very young, how to negotiate. And it is something that, well, I'll admit, a couple years out of my divorce with that particular individual, I wasn't as great at negotiating. But for the most part, negotiation and the ability to get what I want, but also provide what somebody else needs, was a skill that I have worked on throughout my whole life due to my dad. So the art of negotiating is this ability to, first, you must decide what it is you want. You can't walk into anything not knowing exactly what you want. Then you have to know where are the areas that you can give and take.
I was going to say, what's the range?
Yeah.
You got to have a range.
Because you're not going to go give your children away. Well, maybe on the right day. But you're not going to give the house away or the car away or whatever. So you need to know, where can I give and take a little bit? But for the most part, what is it that I want? Now, on top of that, my dad would always say, everybody needs something. Everybody wants something, and it's not always money. So you have to figure out what makes that person tick. What is going to help them feel like they are winning? They're getting what they need in this exchange, and that their opinion or their things in their life or in the project are relevant and important. So that ability to determine before you go in to negotiate with anyone, who am I dealing with? What is their temperament? What do they need? What makes them tick? And then you have some basis to begin a negotiations. So in this negotiation, I started with you, well, because it was us last time.
That's right.
There was no Jody. So Jody. So in this negotiations, I'd like to discuss the art of it, because when you can become great at negotiating, whether in business, whether in personal, whether with your children or your ex, the ability to negotiate really diffuses a lot of stress. It helps you walk away from the table more often with what you need, and allowing others to walk away from the table, because when it's one-sided, that's not a negotiation.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing is coming to it honestly. I'm thinking of a client recently that came to me, and her accounts were a mess. And in one way, the previous person had kind of done her a service, but also did her a disservice. But they weren't honest with her. They were just trying to make a buck.
Okay.
And she flat out says to me, she goes, I think that those guys are all just salespeople. And I said, and so am I. And, throughout the conversation, I just kept being honest with her. And it came down to a point where she said, Jody, what do you think I should do? And I said, I can't tell you. You have to decide. And she says, I want your advice. And I said, if it were me, this is what I'd do. And she took my advice. But by the same token, I, on my end, did everything I could to make previous wrongs right to her, so that she felt like she was also getting something out of it. But the whole point of that was basing it on honesty the whole time.
I love that, because what you're doing is I call that owning your agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we use agenda as a negative word in the society, but I'll tell you what, it's a very common thing, it's pervasive, and a lot of people in a lot of situations have an agenda.
Absolutely, 100%.
And certainly in sales, the agenda is to make a sale. Now, if you are owning that agenda, it feels clean, it feels
Correct.
Straightforward.
It's not a secret.
It's not a denial. When someone comes at me, trying to negotiate something, but they're not owning their agenda, then I don't feel comfortable. I don't know what they want.
Right.
So I think we've almost come in, a lot of this will depend on past experiences, especially with our parents, but a lot of us have almost been trained to be manipulative, because that's what worked for us. We don't need to do that anymore.
Correct.
I personally don't want to have to deal with someone or negotiate with someone that I have to be manipulative with. Right. That doesn't feel good to me. So I think what you're speaking to is just that transparency.
Yes, absolutely.
From the very beginning. And then you say, this is what I would love. To me, the thing I've noticed in negotiation is almost always what the other person wants first, before they can even get to maybe what they want in form, is that they want to be heard.
Yeah,
that's correct.
They want to be heard, and they want where they're coming from to be understood, even if you don't agree.
Correct.
Or even if it's negative.
Absolutely. Yes, they still want to be heard and understood. That has to be the foundation of negotiation. From that point, if you can then get to, now what can we do here? But a lot of times people skip that. I had a really interesting experience with this week. I was at a Thai restaurant for lunch, trying to have a business meeting, and this father and daughter next to us were fighting. I mean, yelling, fighting in the middle of this restaurant. I wanted so badly to go,
May I help you?
may I please mediate here? Because what was happening is nothing was being accomplished because neither one of them was willing to listen and understand. Mm-hmm. They were so quick to give their points. And we've touched on this in a couple of our podcasts before, but that listening to understand, Jody, that you talk about quite a bit, that's got to be the foundation of negotiation. From there, you can say, here's what I would love. What would you like? What would work for you to feel comfortable giving that, right? So it's like you're saying, this would really work for me. Now, what would work for you? If you're coming at it one-sided, you're a bully.
Correct.
That's not negotiation, and we've all, been in relationships where that was the case, or dealt with people where that's the case, and there's nothing workable there. You're going to lose every time. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to keep playing a game we lose.
And I think that it's very valuable, that thing, because often people come into negotiations not knowing what they want, because so many people are focused on what they don't want, what they can't have, what is not working. And so it's very interesting. Many people have that difficulty of altering their thoughts to decide what they want. And so when you negotiate, helping someone to guide them along, like what you're saying, Dawni, what is it that you want? And a lot of times they'll tell you, I don't know. Okay, what helps you to feel more peaceful?
Yes. Yeah. What's comfortable for you?
Yeah.
Well, and we also got to stop and actually be present and listen, and not be thinking what our next words are going to be.
Right.
Because otherwise we're really defeating the purpose, because we're not really getting to what they want. There's this place where a fellow coach, he talks about the clunk.
Okay.
And you get to this place where all of a sudden there's a feeling that you went, that's it. Mm-hmm. It's the clunk.
It drops in and you feel it.
Exactly. And the other person can feel it in you. And so why not take the time to get to the clunk? Because then it's going to resonate with both of you.
Right. And do we really want something that's not a win for everyone involved?
Well, I think a balanced person would hope for it to be a win.
but here's what I want to say about this, because I have experienced a lot of different sides of this in my business. Even before I was in the business I'm in with coaching now, for years I was a photographer. So there were all sorts of negotiations happening on a fairly regular basis. What I know is if it's not a win for everyone involved, it's not sustainable. So right. You may think that you've had a win in a negotiation, but if it's not a win for them, there will be a price to pay at some point.
That's correct. And because you cannot go any place when only 2 of your tires on a 4-tire car is going someplace. And so everybody needs to be on the same path, the same journey, and there needs to be something that touches your soul so you do feel like it is meaningful to you. Because whether people really realize it or not, if you do not feel valued, if you do not feel heard, if you do not feel a part of whatever's going on, you can only stay for so long.
And this is true whether it's romantic relationships, friendships, business relationships. You look at a business partnership, there has to be buy-in. And I mean buy-in of the value of that business or that project, whatever you're working on. If the people that are on that team have not bought into that goal, to that dream, to that value, you're just asking for trouble down the road.
That's right.
So to me, in my negotiations, one of the questions I ask myself before I even go into that negotiation is what will be a sustainable solution for every person involved.
Yes.
So I think that, just looking, it's a little bit more long-term thinking than walking out the door with what you want right that second, but what's the price you're going to pay eventually.
Right. And part of negotiating is being able to walk in and have done your homework so you know what you bring to the table.
Due diligence, baby.
And then and you want to address, this is what I see you bringing to the table. This is the value you are in this project. This is the value I believe I bring. And I see this often, and women, it's an interesting thing because for centuries, women have not been raised to negotiate, to stand up. And I was having this little debate with my girlfriend. I think it's so interesting because I had to do a lot of breathing because she was trying to convince me, and with us, you better freaking have your ducks in a row if you want to alter what I've taken a lot of time.
Let's hear your research, and it better make sense. Yeah.
So she was trying to get me to waver and understand that women are out of line for asking for the same pay rate as a man.
Oh boy.
So I looked at her and I said, all right, this is what I'm saying. Is whether it's a woman or a man and you walk into a project or a business and you're coming in as the green, right? I'm not going to say that she, just because she's a woman, needs to make what the CEO or what the VP is making just because she's a woman and she's coming in. But what I am saying is that if I am equal, if my ability, my education, and what I bring to the table is equal to that man, absolutely, I should be paid equal to him. And we got into the point that part of the hiccup is that men have been taught for centuries how to negotiate to get what they want. They were taught as little boys. And so it's going to take a few minutes because now it's just coming around where women are realizing, oh my gosh, we weren't taught that. We were taught to be polite. Polite is great. I'm not saying not to be polite. To not ruffle feathers. Ruffling feathers sometimes is a beautiful thing, but not being the person who stirs the crowd.
You don't have to be contentious to be empowered. When my daughter, who's now 9, was 7, she did for the biography fair, she was Susan B. Anthony. And at the end of the day, she had learned all of this stuff about women's votes and everything. I said, aren't you glad to live now when women have equal rights? And she chuckled. She said, equal rights-ish. And I said, what do you mean? This is a 7-year-old. She said, we're still referred to as the weaker sex and wage gap. Okay. So I said, tell me, what do you think wage gap is? And she said, we deserve, and she said it very simply, equal pay for equal work.
Correct.
That simply. She said, when I'm an adult or when I'm ready to get my first job at 16, here's what I can tell you. I will sit at that table and we will talk until I'm being paid what I'm worth.
Yeah. And there was an actress, and I'm not going to say her name, but there's an actress, by the way, her movie is fabulous. Okay. Anyway, she did come out, and I really gained more respect for her because her point was that, yes, women haven't been taught to negotiate for centuries. However, as we are here, and she took ownership, that's what I really like. She said, I am getting paid less than my co-star who is a male, and I'm doing the same thing, same talent. But she said, I'm going to take ownership because what I failed to do was to negotiate my value, my worth, and my equal stance with him. And she went on to say, that's where a lot of the hiccup is for individuals, men and women at this point. When you negotiate, you need to know your value. You need to know what it is you want, what you bring to the table. You need to know these things, or else you are going to walk away from that table not feeling fulfilled, not feeling valued.
I have to tell you a funny story. This is a little bit different story, but I went on a vacation to Mexico. And I know at some point in my life I had learned that in Mexico they like to negotiate. So I didn't even think about it. So I go up to this vendor, and I'm used to going to vendors in the US, and just paying the price that's there. So he tells me the price on something I want, and I went, and he says, "Give me price." And so I gave him a price. And so he put his thumb down and he said, "Give me another price." He was indicating, he was teaching me how to negotiate.
Oh.
And it was so funny. So he was teaching me to go lower. And so it was so cute because he took the time to actually remind me about negotiating. And I was so pleased with that interaction that I didn't buy just that one item. I think I bought his whole table.
Oh, good for you.
But that was just a fun interaction to remind me of that power that I have to be able to negotiate.
Yes, and I think it is important, which we've all spoken to, is that negotiations doesn't have to be conflict. It doesn't have to be mean or brutal. It actually is the opposite.
It can be fun.
Yes, it can be. I love it because it is such a thrill to see everybody walk away from the table feeling
Yes. Yes. To me, that's the fun in it, is when I'm saying, I get creative. I really think outside of the box when I'm doing this. How can it be a win for every single person involved? To me, that is one of the most challenging and fun contexts to have for anything I'm doing. When I'm
Right.
coming from that place, I feel good. I feel clear. I feel transparent. And in the past, and definitely in relationships, I've come from a place more of, I just want to get my needs met, not caring as much, or maybe resentful and angry because I already felt like the balance
Was off.
Was off.
Yeah.
And when I'm coming from that place, what I can tell you is it doesn't feel good. So that's another thing, is to get clear
Because
before
it
you're
feels
doing
desperate.
it. Absolute and angry. Right?
Yeah, I gotta get it because he's freaking, or who, or
Yes. Yes.
she, pissed off.
Yes. So that's another thing, and a good indication before you go into it is, what place am I coming from?
Right.
Am I coming from desperation? Am I coming from fear?
Right.
Am I coming from manipulation? Am I coming from resentment? Am I coming from revenge?
Then you should not step to the table.
Exactly. Then you get clear yourself. Go get some coaching, have a cup of coffee and breathe a little bit, or whatever you need to do before you get back there, so that you're coming from your center.
Right.
And when you're coming from your center in the negotiation, the result of that negotiation will be centered.
Absolutely. Okay. Anything else?
You know what? All I want to say is, let's do it more. Let's start to look at what areas in our life that we can negotiate, instead of just accepting, I can't have that thing. I really want that thing, but I can't afford it, or I don't have time, or whatever we think the block is. We can negotiate even with ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, you change your mindset. Instead of "I can't," if you say "How can I?"
Exactly.
It changes the way your brain processes and thinks, and it goes toward finding out how you can.
Yeah.
It
What
looks
can
for
I do?
solutions.
What can I have? What are my talents?
More openness to even the possibility of that is what I would end with.
Okay. All right. In your day, you will fall down, stand up, brush off, and move on. Talk to you.